So good morning, everyone. I'm Suid. I'm the Vice President of Data Analytics at Affinity. So few words for Affinity was founded 12 years ago to become the world's leader of applied AI. And today, I'm junior comparing to my guests. So thank you to be here and welcome. So the question is to share or not to share data. To discuss this, let's start by presenting yourselves, maybe briefly, with your data responsibilities. So, Igor, we start by men here.
Okay, well, thank you very much. My name is Igor Caron. I'm the CEO of LightOn, but this is not the reason I'm here. I'm here because with Franck Bardol, we co-founded the Paris Machine Learning Meetup, which has now about 7,000 members. It's one of the largest meetup in the world in machine learning. It's in Paris. It really shows that there is a lot of activity here.
I come from INRIA. This is a public research institute. And I am currently working on a project of creation of Institute of AI in Paris.
Thank you.
So I work at Google, and in particular in AI policy, a field where data sharing is an important topic.
The first question would be, what is your impression in data access in France or in Europe?
So I just think first that France is regularly ranked among the best countries worldwide when it comes to its open data program. From what we see at Google, it's probably one of the countries that shares most data, and I think it has this recent announcement that has been made around health. So I think it goes in the right direction in terms of opening more and more data, which is a good thing in our views.
I'm going to be a bit more skeptical on things, and I guess
that's why you are
being
here.
a policy expert that you are, maybe you have a more diplomatic way of saying things. But let me put it this way: when I'm in the meetup, I'm just not the organizer. I'm just the guy who goes to all the meetups because I'm organizing it, and I'm seeing a lot of things. The health thing that is going on nowadays, it's a good thing, but it's been going on for the past 4 years now. That is. The whole ecosystem itself is essentially yearning for this. And to a certain extent, a lot of the issues that is essentially being projected on us is really the issue of privacy. There is never really a consideration that goes into the people that are essentially dying because the right things are being done in terms of diagnosis and everything. So to a certain extent, what we see at the meetup level are a lot of people trying to essentially make do with data. We see a lot of startups that are essentially doing well in terms of health, mostly because they've been getting their data from either the US or China. And we're not seeing too many of those startups thriving in the French ecosystem, mostly because of French data. So that's a big letdown as a citizen to essentially see that it's not going fast enough. Mostly because there are people that are being affected and it's not being taken care of. On top of this, you can see that at other levels. The health thing is like a big thing because people are dying because of it. And the other thing would be more along the lines of other areas. Let me take the example, for instance, of justice, law, and everything. You have several startups that are trying to essentially raise themselves in the ecosystem nowadays. One of the main aspects of legal announcements being public is really that they are supposed to be public, but not in some open sharing type of way. So you only have access now to about 10% of those information, and the 90% is really the one that would really make those startups to be much more efficient in terms of helping lawyers, even though they feel that they are in competitions. The very interesting thing is for the citizen themselves, that it's actually a good thing that those data become open. And really, this is one of the question marks as a citizen as to why this is not the case as often as it should, mostly because in the early stage of looking at some of this data, we have had presentations of people pointing out that there were a lot of disparities on how sentencing was actually being performed in different places in France. The main problem that we have eventually with the legal systems and so forth can essentially be ironed out as long as the data is being shared. And what we see nowadays is that it's not going fast enough.
Yeah, we totally agree. So we have here two points of view. So Isabelle, in the GDPR context, according to what is the balance between giving access to all data and protecting personal data, maybe?
I think we can do with GDPR. Anyway, we have to do with GDPR, so it's not a question. For the final user, it's a beginning of something. I think that people are can now realize that something happened with their data in the environment. Anyway, I think that people are not ready to pay for services. They are used to have access to very high quality services for free. And now they cannot pay for this. So most of the people will just say, I agree. So at the end, this will not change a lot of things. For companies, it's maybe a little bit different because a lot of small companies are afraid of all these things that they have to be ensured for the security and privacy. They cannot do anything they want to offer you products or better services and so on. But I think that for very large company, they have a large set of data and the capability to provide anonymity with a certain level of certification and so on. They will still be able to work on this data, for example, to find patterns, to detect group behaviors and things like this. So they will still have this competitive advantage. So I think that open data can be, even if it is not fast enough, a good answer for smaller companies, for the whole ecosystem, to have also access to data. And in this context, I think also that the standardization, the way data will be shared, proposed, qualified, and so on, will be a major point to give access to the most possible people.
You are talking about sharing data. For you is more about open data than just sharing. It could be between two parties than open data, right?
I think that sharing is already done by a lot of companies. For example, for researcher, you can collaborate with a company and have access to some data. But this is always in one specific context for one purpose. So if you want to go further, you have to go to open data.
Okay, thank you. So Igor, according to you, how could we encourage those institutions to open their data and to share it with startups or anyone who needs to?
Thanks for the question. It's a very interesting one. Let me try to answer this on several levels. The first one is, I think, GDPR for a lot of people is a little bit like Fight Club. You don't talk about GDPR. It's kind of the thing, you don't know what it is, but you kind of have to know what it is. The thing of it is, when it percolates down to different layers of society, a lot of different ways of interpreting it are essentially being put in place. I can think of at least one example where you have a lot of siloed data right now in movie theaters type of things. And so we have a lot of data here in France in that, but people are still asking themselves, a little bit like in London, according to someone I talked to yesterday, Yves Raymond from Netflix. The fact is, you're kind of wondering whether or not a 1950 movie actor is giving you permission to essentially use his image, or a person in the street back in 1952 is giving you the permission to essentially show his image 70 years later. So a lot of these discussions that essentially are kind of interesting on their own are essentially making them very much siloed. So to one extent, there is a lot of the GDPR thing that is percolating into society, and it's not being understood as much as it should, or at least the law itself has not been clear on how to go about this. But on the more technical level, I think I have no business to essentially be in there because I'm not gaining any money out of this. But my main problem as a private citizen is finding out that there is not enough research on making sure that this data is available. To be very clear, there are different type of techniques that are essentially being developed nowadays, some of them by Google DeepMind, on essentially doing classification by using encrypted data. One of those group is called Open Mind. The main thing here is that you find out that it's not just a GDPR issue. It's the ability for two companies that are competing to essentially share data that are encrypted so that none of the other two can actually do something with them. But at the very least, when the model is essentially taking the two sources of data, it becomes better and better. So on the technical level, it looks to me like we are not doing well, or at least on the research level, it's not being funded at the level it should, because there are a lot of good people here in France or in Europe that can actually do the work and are already submitting those ideas, but those ideas are not funded. So as a private citizen, I'm thinking that if GDPR, and GDPR is the law of the land, we are not doing an adequate job of funding research, and not just research for 10 years down the road, research now, to essentially make sure that the private sector or the public sector can have a meaningful way of sharing data without having this issue of privacy and so forth.
And so I'd just like to answer to the Igor's 2 points. On the first point, I agree that GDPR is not a barrier to data sharing. But it's true, as you said, that sometimes the regulation is still a bit new and not extremely well understood by all partners, and which can create frictions in data sharing agreements. I think when the case law will improve...
Friction is the word.
Yeah, and so that's the first point. On the second point, the technical aspect that we should improve on encryption, etc. I think on top of this technical aspect, GDPR has also brought an interesting idea for data sharing, that is portability. Portability is a good solution to respect users' privacy, user consent, and allow data to circulate. And on that point, I just point to a project that Google has, with other companies, is doing. It's the data transfer project, and the idea is to really allow a real portability, because it's not enough to download your data if they're not in an exploitable format, and you cannot just use them in another service. That's a bit of useless portability. So we're really trying to create kind of bridges between services, so that you can, in a frictionless way, switch from one service to another and export and import your data, but still keeping a full control of it. So maybe portability is a good answer from GDPR on data sharing. From
your point of view, Ludovic, what are currently the initiatives that we already have, you as Google, to allow people to get access to data?
I would say mainly it comes from our research branch. First, all our research is open source. That's the DNA of our research branches. But on top of that, we share a lot of data sets. So for instance, we have more than 60 data sets that are shared by the research teams. There's also datasets shared by YouTube. One that is very well known on GitHub is YouTube 8 million. So you have 8 million videos that are labeled and precisely organized so that you can train your models on them. If you want to train a model to recognize the sound of waves, the sound of birds, the sound of different animals, we have labeled in videos exactly the moments where you hear those songs, and that helps anyone train its model. It's totally open source, and I think that's our main contribution. On top of being involved in companies like Kaggle, that has more than 10,000 datasets, as well as ImageNet, that is a very big project that is led by Fei Li in Stanford. So we mainly support, either with our data or external data, shared data set, well labeled, I would say. That's important.
Thank you. So Isabelle, as you are working closely with researchers, today, how do you feel about those initiatives? Are they facilitating your lives in terms of research, in training your algorithms?
Researchers are used to work on international benchmark because they need to have some common reference to compare their results, and they are used to work with such datasets. Anyway, it's often not in-house because the benchmark cannot capture the heterogeneity of real-world data, and so they are very happy to have access to larger sets given by partners, so most of the time in collaboration with companies on specific projects. But they are also very careful to all this new initiative, and initiative from large company, but also from everything that is public. I think this is, for us, very important to be able to train and to compare things. And I think that something that is important also in open data policy and so on, public policy, is first to give the idea that this is a good direction, but also maybe to help medium-sized company or small companies to have access to this, because we say that GDPR is not well understood by everybody, and a lot of companies are afraid of their responsibility for data. And if you have a trusted third party, that is a French state, the French government, that give you access to a platform that has some certification, this can help everybody to go in this direction.
Just to make sure that I understand well your point, today we have the first barrier, which is GDPR. Nobody understands what is exactly GDPR, and we are not sure what is the risk by sharing data. So to be safe and to be comfortable, we don't share data because we don't know which risk we are running by sharing data. So Igor, could we give something in return to those companies when they share data, just to make them feel comfortable?
At this point in time, I cannot. I cannot tell you this. I mean, I'd like to do that, but right now it seems that the percolation of what it means has still not gotten into the right stage of understanding. If I were to be pleading for something, it's for everybody to be much more aware of what that actually means, and read the second side of this thing is to actually have algorithms and methods to handle this correctly. It's not just an encrypted thing. It's really that the spirit of it actually means that you have to have research and development on those levels at a much deeper level, and it needs to be funded. And the social society of France really expects those things to come out. If the laws like this are coming about, we expect also that on the technical side, it actually is taken care of. So to that extent, I think as a private citizen, I'm more concerned about making sure that on the research side, we have some of the best researchers, but they are not getting funded to be looking at those specific programs. It's real shame. It's real damn shame, really. So my point is really, as a private citizen, to be looking at this and say, let's be the best at having algorithms that can handle these type of things so that we can eventually be much more like what the policymakers are intending to do with GDPR, to be the law of the rest of the world somehow. If we are to develop those techniques, those algorithms and everything, we are, as a European hub, capable of exporting those GDPR and type of things much more abroad than we currently can.
So thank you all. I'm seeing that our time is over, so thank you to make this clear for everyone, and happy to have shared this moment with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.